Hey Bookaholics, so welcome back to another video. Today I am bringing you my December wrap-up. In December, I actually managed to read a lot of books. I think in part due to the fact that I did participate in Lightfall, which is part of the Magical Readathon, and it's one of my favorite readathons, so I partake in literally everything that could possibly have anything to do with Magical Readathon. So I did complete all of the prompts this year. So I think that had a huge impact on the amount of books that I managed to read. But I did read a decent amount of standalones, but I also read 3 series this month. So I'm going to be going through all of the books that I read and my thoughts, etc. I haven't compiled my statistics, so I will be doing my year wrap-up video where I go through all of my statistics. So you know, it's not a big deal. I don't think anyone really cares all that much. So let's get into the digital books that I read first. This one is actually one of the ones is going to be making its way onto my favorite standalones list, and that is The Winter Garden by Alexandra Bell. This is a literary style fantasy. It's very reminiscent of the Night Circus, for me at least, and in it we are following 2 women, the first of which is a young woman who, when she was a child, she was experiencing a lot of grief over her mother dying, and the Winter Garden appeared in her garden. It's this magical garden that appears when people need it most, and then in her adulthood she spends her time trying to find the garden again. And we are also following her friend, who is an American young woman from New Money, who is an artificer, and she is looking to marry upwards, essentially. And it's a really beautifully told story. Like I said, it does have that whimsy of the Night Circus. It also has that almost nonsensicalness that the Night Circus has. So if you're a fan of the Night Circus, then I think that you will really enjoy this one. Another one that I read was Midnight in Everwood by M.A. Kuznia. This is a Nutcracker retelling, and in it we are following Marietta, who is a Victorian young woman whose family are looking to marry her off, but she wants to become a ballerina. It's very much, I have said this multiple times in videos, but she very much reminds me of if you took the best of Jo March and the best of Amy March and combined the two, then you have Marietta. So she was a very fascinating character to follow. It was very whimsical, it was very beautiful. I had generally a good time with it. I think it trailed off a little bit too much at the end for me, but I had a really good time reading the book and I gave it 4 stars. And the last standalone that I read digitally was The Raven and the Reindeer by T. Kingfisher. This is the second T. Kingfisher book that I have read. I had a really good time with it. The Snow Queen isn't actually a fairy tale I'm hugely fussed about, so it was quite nice and refreshing to have enjoyed one. I know that there's all the Frozen hype and all of that, but it was really nice. I really like the way that T. Kingfisher does fairy tales because, one, they always have a really unique spin. They do it where there is that touch of darkness that you have from the original fairy tales, which I really appreciate. So the combination of the two, and then it does feel more fantastical than fairy tales do. I don't know how to explain that, but more fantasy, less folklore at times. I really liked the combination of all of those elements, and that's something that T. Kingfisher brings forward really well. I found that in Nettle and Bone as well. So for the most part, I had a really good time with this book. Another standalone that I read, but moving into physical books, was The Snow Child by Eowyn Ivy. This is a story that is a retelling of, I think it's called The Snow Girl is the original story, and it is a story of a couple who are living in this very cold, almost barren wilderness, and they are struggling to conceive, and then they make a snow child in a moment of love, and they wake up and the child is awake, and it's very ethereal. It is a very intense book, this one, so please check content warnings. Also, just it is one of those that weighs heavily emotionally, so do bear that in mind. But oh my god, it was so beautiful. I had a really good time with this book, and yeah, the emotional impact is definitely what I was reading it for, and it definitely delivered. Another one that is also very folkloric and fairy tale-esque is I read 2 short stories by Nora Roberts, which are In Dreams and The Winter Rose. In Dreams is essentially a fantasy wintry version of Sleeping Beauty fairy tale, but inverted, where he is the one that is asleep and she comes to his aid. And then we are following Winter Rose, which is basically a Beauty and the Beast retelling. You're in this wintry wonderscape where you have this, is again gender bent, you have this princess who really wants to only protect her people and doesn't let outsiders in, but then there is this wounded prince that shows up and her power for healing to help him, and they were interesting. I had a good time. I liked the fairy tale folkloric feel of them. They were very, very romantic-y as well, so anyone wanting romantic-y, I would recommend. If you like fairy tale retellings, it was a good time, but I don't have hugely strong thoughts. One I do have strong feelings about, however, is The Wolf and the Whale by Jordana Max Brodsky. I loved this book so much. It was so intense. This is the story of Omat, who is a Inuit, and they are training to be a shaman of their people. Essentially, they head out into the big unknown because their people are starving. And while they're out there, they encounter the Vikings that at this time are occupying Greenland. And it is a clash of cultures and societies. It is an interesting take on this period in history that is like now so talked about, and it's a fascinating book, and I had such an incredible time with it, and I would highly recommend checking this out if you are interested in folklore, or if you just want a wintry setting epic fantasy, because you don't have to think of it as our world if you don't want to. And it was just incredible. So many discussion points in this book. This would be a fantastic book club read if you are into that kind of thing, because it has so many things that you can discuss about community, society, individual impact, also the differences in cultures and how to maneuver that. And in this historical setting, it was just absolutely fascinating, and I really, really loved this book. Now getting into the series, the first series that I'll talk about is the Mages in the Mundane series, which consists of The Reborn Prince, The Ice Mages, The Frosted Roses, and then I also read the prequel, which is Matilda of the Mages. And this is a really fun fairy tale-esque, fantasy-esque series. They're all interconnected. It's a fun series. It's self-published. Not one that I necessarily am going to be like, oh my god, everyone go read it. But if you just want like a really fun, wintry fantasy series, it was a good time. But I don't have strong thoughts on it at all. I actually would struggle to give you synopses of individual books at this point, I think. So good, but not impactful. Another one that I quite liked, but that isn't necessarily a new favourite, is I read The Chronicles of the One by Nora Roberts. This is a fantasy romance series that follows different generations as each book goes on. Well, actually, these two follow different generations. And we are in a post-apocalyptic world where we've had a plague, and loads of people have died, and it's a survival style story, but with a magical element. You have almost like X-Men style mutants in here, and then on top of that you also then have the survival aspect. So it's a post-apocalyptic X-Men with it being heavily focused on romance. So it was a really fun time, and if you're looking for a post-apocalyptic story but you want romantasy but dystopia instead of fantasy, it's a really good shout. Like, I had a good time with it. Again, we're following a different generation from one book to another as well. I didn't feel hugely strongly connected to the characters, but I did enjoy the plot and reading through the story and seeing this world. So it was good, but for romance, I normally would rather feel more connected to the characters than I was. And then the final series that I read this month, which, oh my god, talking of impactful, this one was very impactful, and that's the Beartown trilogy by Frederick Backman. I am not okay. I finished this book a few hours ago, and oh my god, what? Like, just what? What is going on in this town? This is the story of Beartown. Beartown is a place out in the middle of nowhere in Sweden, and it used to be an interesting place, and then now, you know, it's each year more unemployment, more people leave, and it's a dying town. However, this town has always been a hockey town, and this new team that is predominantly built around this star player have a shot at actually winning a big title and therefore going the full 9 yards. So this town is actually beginning to hope for the first time. So when things start to go awry, we have the town being divided between people who want this team to win at any cost and people who believe that justice should prevail. And it's a very interesting series. it continues on past that, and we're following lots of different characters in this town. We see lots of different perspectives, lots of different outlooks, and it's fantastic. Again, fantastic book club reads because they are really good for discussion points, and they talk about one problem from so many different social perspectives and dynamics in a way that I thought was absolutely masterful. So absolutely fantastic series, would highly recommend. It's definitely got a lot of content warnings, so please go check them out before you do read. But if you can handle the content warnings, it's an incredible series, and I do think that the things that are brought up in the series are not for shock value. So if you look at the content warnings and they're things that you can handle, but you're concerned about someone using them, bear in mind they are handled, in my opinion, they're well handled, well discussed, and they are brought forth in a way that is not for shock value. It is the exact opposite. It is to create a conversation. So without giving any spoilers away, because I know some people do consider content warning spoilers, go check them out and then understand that they are well handled. And yeah, it's a fantastic series. So that's my very lengthy wrap up for the month of December. As I said, I will be doing my year wrap up and statistics and stuff, but that is all from me for today. So I hope that you enjoyed, and I hope that 2024 so far is treating you well, and I will hopefully catch you in another one soon. Bye guys.